Hey guys, welcome back to my channel and thank you so much for watching. Today's video is going to be a tutorial to show you how I made this Grinch inspired cake. So let's get to it. I'm starting out with 3 8-inch round chocolate cakes, which I've cut in half, and I'm going to be brushing on some simple syrup and using some Swiss meringue buttercream for my icing. Because I have so many layers in this cake, I'm just adding a thin layer of that buttercream and just making sure it's smooth and even between each layer. I'm going to pop that into the fridge for about 20 minutes to firm up because I'm going to be carving my cake and it's much easier to do so when it's cold. Using a 6-inch cake pan, I'm going to place that in the middle of my cake and then mark out where it sits with my knife as a guide. And I'm going to be cutting on an angle. So I want to cut where I've marked out the circle, but I want to cut down so it's kind of slanted, so I'm not taking anything away from the bottom of the cake. I'm going slowly all the way around, not making big cuts, just making small ones and making sure it's even all the way around. And then on the front of my cake, I'm actually going to cut straight down because I want that to be the front of my hoo house that I'm making. Once I'm happy with the way it looks, I'm going to take a cake board and place that on top and then quickly flip my cake over because this is the way I'd like to present it, so it kind of looks a little Who-ish and Dr. Seussy. There's so many different styles of the Who houses that I saw, and this is a very tame version, so if you want to go a little crazier and make it a little more wonky or even topsy-turvy looking, you go right ahead. Next, I'm going to apply a thin layer of buttercream for my crumb coat and then pop that into the fridge for 25 minutes. Once you can touch the buttercream and nothing comes off on your finger, it's ready for its final coat. I'm being quite generous with this. I'm going to take most of it off with my bench scraper, just making sure you have a nice even layer all the way around, and then using my scraper, I'm scraping it off until it's nice and smooth, and then using my offset spatula just to pull all that buttercream that built up on the top into the center. Unfortunately, my camera decided to stop filming as I was covering my cake in fondant, but if you need to see how to do that, you can check out any of my previous videos. I'm going to start making my decorations, and the first things I'm going to make are my door and my windows. And to do that, I've rolled out some light blue fondant and I've just freehanded the shape that I wanted, and I placed those on top of darker blue fondant that I cut out in the exact same way. I just made them bigger, and I placed the lighter shade on top so the darker fondant kind of just framed the edges of each piece. I placed those on my cake using some water and just made sure that the windows were even with each other. For the snow on top of my house, I rolled out some white fondant and then using my X-Acto knife cut out a big wavy circle, and I've attached that to the top of my house using some shortening. I wanted it to look extra snowy, so I added another layer of my white fondant on top, but you could just stick with one if you prefer the way it looks that way. To make my Christmas trees, I'm using some green fondant and rolling that into a cone shape. And then I'm sticking these onto a skewer because it just makes it easier for me to add the texture. And I'm using a pair of small scissors and cutting into the tree, just starting from the top and going all the way down. And it makes it look like a nice, perfect Christmas tree. I added those to either side of my cake, and then I'm rolling out some thin snakes of white fondant and putting that all along the bottom to look like snow. I'm just using some water to attach that, and then with my fondant tool, I'm just adding a little texture into the snow so it doesn't look like smooth snakes of white fondant. I want to make a little Christmas wreath for the front door, so to do that, I'm rolling out some more of my green fondant and then putting a piece of saran wrap over that really tight and using my circle cutter to cut out the shape. This just allows the fondant to kind of bubble up a bit so it doesn't look like a flat wreath. It actually gives it a little more shape. And then I'm just using my scissors again to give it the same texture I gave the Christmas trees. I added a little ball of yellow for my doorknob, and then I added a bunch of tiny little balls that are different colors to my Christmas trees to look like decorations. To make the tiny little bow for the top of my wreath, I'm rolling out some red fondant and cutting that into a strip, and then on each end I'm tapering those off and then cinching it in the center and then bringing both ends of that strip into the middle. And then using another strip of fondant, I'm just adding the center of my bow. I placed that on top of my wreath using some water, and this is what I have so far. For my chimney, I've taken some red fondant and added a little bit of black to make it more of a brick color. And then I just want to create a square-ish shape. So I'm just pressing that continuously against my countertop just to kind of flatten out each side. It's not a perfect square, but it was good enough for me. And then I cut off one end so it would lay flat against the top of my cake. To indent my brick pattern, I just used the back of a butter knife I had, and this was not perfect, but it looked good enough to me. And then of course, if there was snow on top of my house, there would be snow on top of my chimney, so I just cut out some more of that white fondant in the same wavy pattern, just smaller, and glued that to the top of my chimney using some water. I want to create a space for my Grinch to go, so I cut out a square in the top of my chimney, and then I rolled out some black fondant and then filled that space in. I put that on top of my cake just off to the side and glued it down with some water. I wanted to recreate the scene where the Grinch is getting caught in the chimney because that's one of my favorites. So to do that, I took some very bright, vibrant green fondant and rolled out a little circle for his bum and placed that on the very top of my chimney. And then I rolled out two long, thin snakes of green fondant, and I stuck those onto some skewers and kind of shaped them once they were on the skewers. Mine didn't really look a whole lot like legs, but I did my best. I stuck those right into my little bum piece and made sure the legs kind of looked like they were flailing a bit. And then I rolled out some white fondant and used my smallest flower cutter because it looked perfect, like the little ruffly tops of his Santa shoes. And then I placed that directly onto my skewer. For his Santa shoes, I just rolled out some red fondant into a little ball and then shaped it into a teardrop shape, making sure to keep the ends quite thin and pointy. Next, I took some gray fondant and rolled that into a teardrop shape, and then using my balling tool, I poked a hole in the top and swirled it around, and then used my fingers to pull out the edges and thin them out and make them look a little more flared, because these are going to be the bags that he's cramming all his loot into. And then using some different colors, I created some ornaments and some presents to go in and around the bag. To make my windows look a little more windowy, I took some black food coloring with my paintbrush and just added the lines. For around the windows, I wanted to add some garland, so I used the same colored green I used for my trees and rolled it out into a thin rope, and then using some water, I attached those to the outside. And then again, using my scissors, I just gave them the same texture and then added a bow to the bottom of each one. Next, I mixed up some darker gray fondant and then added some little cobblestone looking steps to the front of the house. For the final detail on my cake, I added some Christmas lights, and to do this, I'm using my handy clay extruder. I highly recommend getting one, and I will link the one that I'm using below. I am using some black fondant here and just rolling out a really thin, long rope of that. I draped it across the board in this squiggly pattern, and then it made it look like it was coming out of the chimney. I secured it with some shortening, and then I made another one of my gray bags for it to go into because he's obviously stealing them. And then for the Christmas lights, I grabbed a whole bunch of different colors and rolled out teeny tiny little balls, and then I secured them along my thin piece of fondant using some piping gel. And I highly recommend using piping gel because it just keeps that on there versus water. I found that it just kept falling off, so the piping gel worked really well. And this is what it looks like. I think this cake turned out super cute. It's one of my favorite Christmas movies, so I was super pumped to make this. Thank you so much for watching, and be sure to subscribe for more holiday tutorials coming your way soon.